Right when a homeless man asked Arnold Schwarzenegger for a single dollar, he never dreamed the bodybuilding legend's response would flip his life upside down. It was a blistering afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind where the sun baked the asphalt into a shimmering mirage, and the salty breeze off the Pacific barely cooled the sweat dripping down your neck. Outside a weathered gym on Venice Beach, a giant of a man emerged, shoulders like boulders, arms thick as tree trunks, and that unmistakable Austrian growl cutting through the chatter of the crowd. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, the Governator. Sure, time had etched a few more lines into his face, but his aura? It still roared louder than a packed stadium. Across the street, another man stood half hidden by a flickering streetlight. His name was Jamal. His skin gleamed dark under the sun, but his clothes told a different story, faded and frayed, a patchwork of a gray hoodie and jeans that hung loose on his weary frame. In one hand, he clutched a cardboard sign scrawled with "Please help" in shaky marker. The other hand fidgeted in his pocket, tracing the edges of a worn-out photo he hadn't looked at in weeks. Jamal hadn't tasted a proper meal in 3 days, just a stale donut he'd scavenged from a dumpster behind a donut shop. His stomach twisted, a gnawing reminder of how far he'd fallen since the auto shop he'd worked at shut down 6 months ago. Now he slept on a flattened cardboard box in an alley off Lincoln Boulevard, his life reduced to one desperate hustle after another. Jamal's eyes darted across the street, scanning the gym rats and tourists for someone who might spare a dime. Then he saw him, Arnold. The man who'd flexed his way from Austria to Hollywood, who'd crushed weights and box office records alike. Jamal's breath caught. A guy like that? He's not gonna care about me. But hunger doesn't wait for courage. Wiping sweat from his brow, he crossed the street, his worn sneakers slapping the pavement. His voice rasped as he neared Arnold, who'd paused to sign a kid's baseball cap. "Sir, can you spare a dollar?" Arnold turned, slow and deliberate, his ice blue eyes locking onto Jamal like a hawk spotting prey. The crowd hushed for a split second. Jamal braced himself, expecting a quick no or a blank stare. But Arnold's face cracked into a grin, wide and warm, like he'd just heard a punchline. "A dollar?" he boomed, his accent rolling thick over the words. "Come on, my friend. We can do better than that. Sit with me." He gestured to a weathered bench nearby, the kind you'd see old-timers swapping stories on. Jamal blinked, his mind racing. Sit with Arnold Schwarzenegger? He scanned Arnold's face for a trick, a hint of pity or mockery, but all he saw was that grin and a spark of something real, curiosity, maybe. Thanks," Jamal muttered, easing onto the bench. His hands trembled as he set his sign down, angling it so it wouldn't scream his shame to the world. Arnold plopped beside him, his bulk making the bench creak, and leaned in, those massive forearms resting on his knees. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone steady, like he was talking to an old gym buddy. "Jamal," he said, voice barely above the hum of passing cars. Arnold nodded, letting the name settle in the air. "Jamal," he repeated, rolling it like he was testing a new weight. Then he chuckled, low and rumbling. "You know, I came to America with $20 and a crazy dream to lift more than any man alive. It wasn't easy. People laughed at my accent, my size, everything. So tell me, Jamal, what's your story?" Jamal swallowed hard, the words clawing their way out. I was a mechanic. Worked on cars down in Inglewood. Loved it, fixing engines, making 'em purr. Had a steady gig, you know. Then the shop closed. Boss couldn't keep up with the bills. Rent piled up, eviction notice came, and he stopped, staring at his hands, calloused and cracked from years of wrenches and oil. Now I'm here, begging for a dollar. Ain't exactly the American dream, right? Arnold didn't flinch. He just listened, his gaze locked on Jamal like he was studying a blueprint. Jamal kept going, the floodgates creaking open. I've been trying to get back on my feet. Hit up every shop from here to Compton, but nobody's hiring. My girl, she left when the money dried up. Took our little boy with her. I don't even know where they are now. His voice cracked, and he rubbed his eyes quick, ashamed of the sting there. I used to be somebody, man. Now I'm just. This? Arnold tilted his head, his grin fading into something quieter, sharper. Jamal, he said, voice dropping low, I've lifted weights that'd crush most men. I've fought Terminators on screen and bureaucrats in Sacramento. But the real strength? It's not here. He flexed an arm, the bicep bulging like a cannonball, pulling a weak laugh from Jamal. It's here. He tapped his chest hard. You're still breathing, still asking, still fighting. That's power. So what's your next move? Jamal stared, caught off guard. My next move? He echoed, his voice thin with disbelief. He hadn't thought past scraping enough change for a burger in months. I don't know, man. Survive? Make it through the night? Arnold shook his head, smirking like a coach pushing a rookie. Surviving's not enough, my friend. You need a goal. Something to lift. Tell me, what do you want? Jamal's throat tightened. He hadn't let himself want anything in so long. It hurt too much when it didn't happen. I want my life back, he said finally, the words spilling raw and ragged. A job. A bed that ain't concrete. Maybe see my kid again someday. Arnold's grin returned, wider this time. Good. That's a start. A solid representative. Now, let's build on it. Arnold reached into his pocket, and Jamal's heart sank. Here it comes, the dollar and a pat on the back. But instead, Arnold pulled out a crisp business card and slid it across the bench. Take this, he said, his tone firm, like a drill sergeant handing out orders. It's a program I know good people, tough but fair. They'll help you clean up, find work, get steady. But you gotta show up. No excuses. Jamal stared at the card, his fingers hovering over it like it might burn him. Why me? He asked, voice trembling. Why help some dude you don't even know? Arnold's eyes softened, just a flicker, and he leaned back, the bench groaning under his weight. Because someone helped me once, he said, quieter now. Back in Austria, I was a skinny kid with nothing. A gym owner gave me a shot, let me sweep floors, lift weights, dream big. Without that, no Mr. Olympia, no Hollywood, no nothing. I pay it forward. That's the rule. Jamal nodded, clutching the card tight. Thanks, he mumbled, standing on shaky legs. He took a few steps, then turned back awkward. Really, thanks for listening, man. Arnold waved him off with a grunt. Don't thank me yet, Jamal. Go lift your life. You're stronger than you think. As Jamal melted into the crowd, Arnold stayed put, staring at the spot where he'd sat. His jaw tightened for a moment, a shadow crossing his face. See, Arnold wasn't just flexing for the cameras. Back in Graz, Austria, he'd grown up dirt, poor, cold winters, thin soup, a father who thought dreams were for fools. He'd gone to bed hungry more nights than he could count, wondering if he'd ever be more than a nobody. Then came the strangers, coaches, gym rats, even a teacher who saw something in that scrawny kid. They gave him a broom, a barbell, a chance. Small acts that stacked up to a life he'd built brick by brick. Now, decades later, he carried the debt with him. Helping Jamal wasn't charity. It was muscle memory, a rep he'd been doing since the beginning. Jamal wandered the streets for hours, the card burning a hole in his pocket. He passed a barbershop mirror, catching his reflection, sunken eyes, wild hair, a man he barely recognized. But Arnold's words echoed, "You're stronger than you think." With the last coins he'd scrounged, he hit a laundromat, washing his hoodie and jeans. If he was gonna walk into that program, he'd do it looking halfway human. It wasn't much, but it was a step, a shaky, terrifying step toward something he hadn't felt in years: hope. That first day at the program was chaos. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, footsteps echoed on tile, and voices barked orders. Jamal flinched at the noise, feeling like an imposter in his clean but worn clothes. But the staff didn't blink. A gruff counselor named Tony sized him up, handed him a towel, and pointed him to a shower. "You're here," Tony said. "That's half the battle." Jamal nodded, clutching the damn card like a lifeline. Days blurred into weeks. The program was no picnic. Job training, resume workshops, mock interviews that left Jamal sweating through his borrowed shirt. But he stuck with it. They hooked him up with a gig at a garage in South LA, fixing beat-up sedans and rusted pickups. The pay was small, the hours long, but the feel of a wrench in his hand again? That was gold. He started saving dime by dime until he could afford a room in a shared apartment, a lumpy mattress, a leaky faucet. But through it all, Arnold's voice stuck with him. "Lift your life." One night, bone-tired after a double shift, Jamal sat down with a stubby pencil and a crumpled sheet of paper. He wrote Arnold a letter, thanked him for that day on Venice Beach, told him about the job, the room, the tiny spark of pride flickering back to life. "I don't know if you'll read this," he scrawled, "but you were right. I'm stronger than I thought." He mailed it, not expecting a reply, just needing to close the loop. Months later, Arnold sat in his office, a quiet space cluttered with trophies and faded photos. He slit open Jamal's letter, reading it slow, line by line. A rare smile tugged at his lips, craggy and real. He folded the paper neat and tucked it into a drawer with other keepsakes: a Mr. Olympia medal, a script page from Terminator, a note from his first coach. For Arnold, it wasn't about the thanks. It was knowing Jamal had grabbed the barbell and started lifting. Jamal's story didn't stop there. Inspired, he started volunteering at the program that saved him. He'd sit with new guys, black, white, young, old, sharing his tale over lukewarm coffee. "I was you," he'd say, pointing to his own chest. "Then some dude with biceps the size of my head told me I could do more. So can you." Word spread. The staff nicknamed him the Comeback Kid, a quiet nod to the fire he'd rekindled. That bench on Venice Beach stayed a backdrop for joggers and selfie snappers, oblivious to the moment it held. But for Jamal and Arnold, it was a pivot, a spark that proved one conversation, one chance, could ripple out forever. Jamal never saw his little boy again, not yet, but he kept a photo of him taped to his mirror, a goal he was still lifting toward. So what's the takeaway? Arnold didn't just give Jamal a hand, he gave him a push. And Jamal? He turned $1 worth of hope into a whole new life. If this story give you a hope or hit you right in the chest, push that like button, share it with your family, and subscribe for more stories that prove strength ain't just muscle. It's heart. Let's keep lifting each other, one rep at a time.